Chapter 3 on adoption first choice. Today we're going to be going over how to scratch the surface, where to start if you have no idea where to start. You've just maybe considered adopting, or you know you want to adopt, but you don't really know where to go from there. When we first started in the same place where we knew we wanted to adopt, but how do you get the ball rolling? You know, everyone will say, I have a cousin who adopted, or I have a friend of a friend of a friend who did, through foster. And then my great Aunt Betty did international. And, it's great that we know so many people who have adopted in certain ways. But the bottom line is your story isn't going to match exactly what their story was. And you might not pick the same way that they chose to adopt. So you just have to research kind of all of the venues and decide which one was best for you. So where do we start researching? Well, if you're gonna look into foster to adopt, that's a state program. That one's pretty easy. Just kind of Google. There's one venue for each state that kind of heads it up. So in our case, Montana State foster care. If you're gonna do domestic, that's a little more broad. You can go from any state. There's open adoption, there's mediated, somewhere in the middle kind of adoptions, and then there's closed adoptions. So then you kind of have to research all of those and what you think works for you. And then there's international adoption, where my husband and I ended up going. And so I'm going to gear a little bit more towards international adoption since that was, our process. But I do urge you just to try to research in Google and see what fits best for you. When we started researching, we found a website. It's called Loving Shepherds Ministry, LSM. And they have a resource. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's like a questionnaire maybe. And you can pick, if you're a couple or if you're single. And then there's maybe about 30 questions. And it helps them, decide what kind of information you need or what might be helpful, etc. So I had someone send me that direction. I went on their website, I filled out their questionnaire. It is so helpful. It gives you, they email you back, and it would just be an attachment just on domestic adoption and what you can expect. And then just on international and what you can expect, and the fees for that and the process. And foster to adopt in that process and what you can expect. Then there's even an attachment where there was different grants and financial aid, and it was just maybe 3 pages of different websites and different grants that you can apply for, which was, that's extremely beneficial. This is all the stuff that you want to know and use during this process. They also had a form or a piece of paper that helped with organizing your own paperwork, kind of like a checklist, which I thought was really beneficial and helpful. There was also another one, it was called Children of All Nations. I didn't use that one when I started because I hadn't found it, but I just came across it recently, and they too kind of had resources just to get you started. And for international adoption, they would kind of show you what countries that you could qualify for. So what some people don't realize is that each country has their own things that you have to check off. Some are really into how much money you make. With the Philippines, like body mass index was one of the things that you had to qualify or be under a certain number. If you've been married so many years. So when my husband and I first started this process, that excluded us from a lot of countries because we had only been married 2 years or whatever it was at that time. They want you to be married for at least 5 years. If you've been divorced, there's just a lot of red tape you have to go through for each country. So on this one, the Children of All Nations, it kind of shows you like, hey, you qualify for this one, and this one. And it will even show you if you were close to qualifying on one and why you just missed out on it. So I just did it recently because I was curious to see how it worked. And the one, Colombia or something, maybe it said I didn't qualify for because we needed to be down there for at least, 3 to 4 weeks. And when I filled out the questionnaire, I had said, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. So you could also go back and kind of personalize or edit the answers to those questions to see if it brings up more options too. But I thought that was really helpful. That just helps narrow it down, because a lot of times people get into this process and it's like, man, where do I, spin a globe, point your finger down, wherever it stops, you're gonna adopt from. And it's not always that easy. You may not qualify just based on your situation and the things that are mandatory for them, for foreigners to be able to adopt from their country. So Loving Shepherd Ministries, check that one out. Really helpful. Like I said, just tons of resources, information, grant information. And then the Children of All Nations. If you are going to do international adoption, it helps you kind of pinpoint what countries you might even be eligible to adopt from. So that's just scratching the surface. Like I said, people, you have to know where to start somewhere. The information has to come from somewhere. So these are just two resources that I found that were really helpful for me, and that I hope will be helpful for you moving forward or in the future. And then also, if you have any resources that you came across and that you really liked, please leave a comment, leave it for others to find, because getting started into this process can be overwhelming. There's a ton of resources, which ones are good and beneficial, which ones might be outdated. So any sharing of our knowledge would be great. I appreciate it. Thanks.